Hey guys, what's going on? Today we're diving into a full review of the EcoFlow Delta 3 portable power station. I'm going to walk you through all of its features, put it through some real-world tests to see what it can handle, and break down the pros and cons so you know if it's the right fit for you. Let's jump right in. Starting with the unboxing, the first thing you'll notice is the power station. Next to it, there's a smaller box that holds all the essentials. Inside, you'll find the quick start guide, the full user manual, and a few helpful cards to get you set up and familiar with the unit. In that same box, you'll also get the AC charging cable. It's a thick 14-gauge cable designed to handle fast charging, which is one of the standout features of this power station. EcoFlow also includes a car charging cable, so you can top it up using your vehicle's 12-volt cigarette port. Now, this method does have some limitations, which I'll break down later in the video. But don't worry, I'll also share an easy workaround if you plan on relying on your car to charge this unit. And finally, you'll find a DC to DC cable, which is another handy option for small devices that use this type of connector. Moving on to the design, this is honestly my favorite part about the Delta 3. The overall look is sleek and modern, and it feels really solid in the hand. Right on the front, you've got a large, bright display that gives you all the important information. You can see your exact battery percentage, the input and output power in real time, and it also calculates the estimated time left based on your current usage. It's one of the clearest and easiest to read displays I've seen on a power station so far. The unit itself is divided into three main output sections, and each section can be turned on independently with its own button, or you can have them all running at the same time. Starting with the DC section, which you turn on using this button, you'll find two 100-watt USB-C ports, perfect for fast charging devices like laptops, tablets, or phones. Right next to them are two USB-A fast charging ports, great for things like cameras, headphones, or other accessories. Next is the AC section, which you can turn on with this button. EcoFlow gives you 6 AC outlets in total, 3 standard 2-prong outlets and 3 grounded outlets. I like that EcoFlow placed these 2 outlets at the bottom, facing to the sides. It's a really smart design detail, because if you plug in a big charger or a bulky adapter, it can hang off to the side without touching the floor while the power station is sitting down. All 6 AC outlets deliver pure sine wave power, which basically means the electricity coming out of them is clean and stable. That's especially important if you're plugging in sensitive electronics like laptops, projectors, or even small appliances. Now, moving to the back of the power station, you'll find the 12-volt section, which also has its own dedicated button to turn it on. Here, you get a standard car cigarette lighter port. I usually use this to power my portable cooler when I'm out camping. Alongside that, there are also 2 smaller DC 5521 ports. This is where you can use the DC to DC cable that comes included in the box, which is handy if you've got small devices that run on 12 volts. And on the top, you'll find all the input ports. They're protected by a sliding cover that tucks neatly inside the unit. The first port here is the solar input. Just keep in mind that the Delta 3 accepts panels up to 60 volts, with a maximum input of 500 watts. Then you've got the AC input port for the charging cable, and right next to it is the EcoFlow expansion port. With the Delta 3, you can connect different extra batteries and expand it up to about 5 kilowatt hours. The Delta 2 was limited to just one extra battery, maxing out at around 3 kilowatt hours, so the Delta 3 gives you a lot more flexibility. Now, comparing the design to the previous model, the EcoFlow Delta 2, the overall size and shape are pretty much the same. Both units come with those sturdy dual handles that make them easy to carry around. As for the ports, you're essentially getting the same lineup, just with a slightly different layout. The only real change here is that the Delta 2 included 2 extra USB-A ports, which you won't find on the Delta 3. The bigger design changes are easy to notice. On the Delta 2, the screen was smaller, while the Delta 3 now comes with a much larger display that's brighter and easier to read. The cooling system has also been reworked. On the Delta 2, there were 2 visible fan vents on each side, but on the Delta 3, they've been moved underneath the handles, which hides them and gives the unit a much cleaner look. And finally, the expansion port that used to be on the side of the Delta 2 has now been relocated to the back of the Delta 3, making the overall design look sleeker and more streamlined. Now, when it comes to the specs, the Delta 3 has a 1024 watt-hour battery using lithium iron phosphate cells, which give it a really long lifespan. The inverter can push up to 1800 watts continuously, which is the same setup as the Delta 2. The big difference is in the surge power. The Delta 2 topped out at 2700 watts, while the Delta 3 goes up to 3600 watts, giving you more headroom for appliances with heavy startup loads. One of my favorite things about EcoFlow, and honestly one of the reasons I think they're way ahead of the competition, is their app. EcoFlow makes one of the best apps for portable power stations. Let me show you how it works. Once you've got the app installed on your phone, the connection process is super quick. As soon as I opened it, the Delta 3 showed up right away, and I just paired it with my phone in a couple of seconds. The app itself is really clean, and you can even pick different layouts for how the info is shown. By default, it connects over Bluetooth, which is great if you're nearby. But if you want to get the most out of it, you can also connect through Wi-Fi. That way, you can check in and control the power station from anywhere as long as you have an internet connection. So, one of the first things I recommend doing as soon as you install the app is going straight into the settings and checking for a firmware update. In my case, there was already a new version available. I definitely suggest installing it, because these updates usually fix small bugs, and sometimes even add new features that make the power station run better. So here's the main panel in the app. From here, you can see the battery percentage, your input and output watts, and it even tells you exactly where the input is coming from, whether it's solar, your car, or AC power. You can also switch the different port sections on or off directly from the app. Now, the app is packed with features. Some of them are pretty advanced if you really want to dig in, but I'll just cover the ones I actually use the most. The first one is setting a custom charging input. With the Delta 3, you can push it all the way up to 1500 watts, which is one of the upgrades over the Delta 2. The older model maxed out at 1200 watts when charging from the wall. But the feature I really like is that you can limit how many watts it pulls from the wall. For example, if you're plugging into an outlet that can only handle, let's say, 600 watts, you can set the charging rate lower so you don't risk tripping a breaker. On top of that, you've also got two other modes: optimized battery charging, which balances speed with battery health, and quiet charging, which slows things down even more to keep the fan noise low. Another option in the app is EcoFlow's X Boost. In simple terms, it lets you run appliances that usually need more power than the unit is rated for. I will explain in more detail later in the video, but I'll also share why I don't really recommend using it in most situations. From the app, you can also set both a charge limit and a discharge limit. The charge limit lets you tell the power station to stop charging once it hits a certain percentage. The discharge limit works the same way but on the other end. There are also some other features in the app worth mentioning. One of them is called Storm Ward. Basically, it can automatically top up your power station when there's a weather alert, so you're always ready in case of an outage. Another one is Backup Reserve Mode, which lets you set aside a certain amount of battery just for emergencies. For example, you can tell it to always keep 20% saved, so even if you're using it during the day, you know you'll still have power left if the grid goes down at night. These are just a few of the extra options, and I won't go too deep here, but honestly, it's worth playing around with the app because EcoFlow gives you a ton of control. Now, this power station really shines in a few different scenarios. Just so you get a better idea of how it can actually be used, let me give you a real example with devices I personally run off of it. When I go camping, especially in the summer, I always bring a fan with me. Plugging in a fan like this one and running it on max speed only pulls about 24 watts from the power station. In the EcoFlow app, that gives me an estimated runtime of around 24 hours straight. If I drop the fan down to its lowest speed, it only draws about 18 watts, which means it could run well over a full day. And since I really only use the fan at night while I'm sleeping, in practice it lasts me several nights before I even need to recharge. Another thing I always bring with me when camping is a cooler, and this is the one I personally use. Now, before I even plug it into the EcoFlow, there's something important to mention. Some devices, like this cooler, can run on either AC or DC. It comes with an AC adapter, but I always recommend using the DC port. Here's why. If you use the AC port, the power station first has to take the battery's DC power and convert it to AC. And then your cooler's adapter takes that AC and converts it right back down to DC again. That's a double conversion, and each step wastes a bit of energy. When you plug directly into the DC port, you skip all that and get a lot more runtime out of the battery. With the cooler on the DC port, it pulls around 47 watts. At first, the app estimated about 16 hours of runtime, but in real use, it can actually go for around 3 days. That's because once the cooler hits its target temperature, it doesn't run constantly. It only kicks on for a few minutes to maintain it, then shuts back off. So if you add this cooler into a camping setup, along with a fan and maybe charging your phone, you can expect about 2 full days of use on a single charge. And if you hook up solar panels, you can pretty much keep it running indefinitely as long as you've got sunlight. Another way I use the Delta 3 when I'm camping or in a spot with no electricity is to charge all my devices. Just to give you a quick example, I plugged in 4 of them at the same time and the unit was pulling a little over 165 watts. The screen said that would drain the battery in about 5.7 hours, but in reality most of those devices will be fully charged in under an hour. So you've got more than enough power to top everything up whenever you need to. Now I'm going to push it a little further and start plugging in some bigger appliances, from the ones that don't use much to the ones that really pull a lot of power, just to see how the Delta 3 handles them. One of the coolest examples and one that I find really useful for outdoor events is a large cooling fan. This one actually has a built-in water cooling system. So I plugged it in and right away the power station showed it was pulling about 237 watts. That gave me an estimated runtime of around 4 hours, which is honestly pretty good. Another thing I tested was this turbo fan, which pulls way more power than a regular fan. It was drawing about 170 watts, and the screen showed a runtime of around 5.5 hours, which is actually really good for something that strong. Moving on to heavier appliances, one of the most practical uses for me is running tools around the house. For example, I plugged in a vacuum cleaner, and according to the EcoFlow display, it was pulling about 1000 watts. That gave me an estimated runtime of roughly 1 hour, which is more than enough to clean a few cars or take care of a quick job without worrying about running out of battery. So now to really push it, I wanted to try some appliances that use heating elements, since those usually draw the most power in a typical home. I started with a small water heater. I plugged it in when the battery was at 93%, and in just about 3 minutes and 24 seconds, it managed to heat the water while draining about 9% of the battery. That still leaves you with plenty of runtime to do this a few more times if you need to. Then I hooked up a panini press, set it to the maximum, and let it run for about 5 minutes, which is about as long as you'd normally use it. Even though it was pulling over 1400 watts, the Delta 3 handled it without a problem and only used up about 14% of the battery. And finally, I tested what I think is one of the heaviest appliances you typically find around the house, an air fryer. I set it to the maximum temperature and let it run for 10 minutes straight. That pulled close to 1800 watts and used around 20% of the battery, but it cooked perfectly. For a portable power station to handle that kind of load is pretty impressive. So those are just a few examples of how the Delta 3 can be used, and as you can see, it definitely passed the test with all of these appliances. Another thing I wanted to test was what happens with the voltage when you really push this power station to the limit, and also see what the real peak output looks like. Now, I don't want to confuse anyone, because the Delta 3 is rated for a 3600 watt surge, but that's only for a quick spike. When I pushed it to over 2400 watts continuously, it automatically kicked into overload protection and shut down, which is exactly what it's supposed to do to keep the inverter safe. One thing I really like is that the app actually sends you a notification when this happens. None of the other power stations I've tested do that, and it's super handy because you immediately know why the unit turned off instead of having to guess. But something interesting I noticed was that right before the overload, the voltage only dipped down to about 117 volts. And that's actually a good sign. It means the inverter is putting out a stable, clean voltage almost identical to what you get from a wall outlet at home, even when it's under a heavy load. The app also has an X-Boost mode, which lets the power station run appliances that normally draw more watts than it's rated for by lowering the voltage instead of shutting off. The downside is that when I tested this by pushing the Delta 3 to the max with 2 heaters, the voltage dropped way down, even below 100 volts. And that's not good, because a lot of appliances are designed to run at around 120 volts. Running them at a much lower voltage can make them less efficient, overheat, or in some cases even damage the device. That's why I wouldn't really use X-Boost unless it's absolutely necessary. Now, when it comes to recharging the Delta 3, there are a few different ways to do it. The easiest is just plugging it straight into a wall outlet. By default, it runs in a mode called Optimized Battery Charging. In this mode, it charges at about 500 watts, which gives you a nice balance between speed and battery health. I tested it, and it went from empty to full in around 2 hours and 20 minutes. There's also a quiet charging mode. If you turn this on, it takes closer to 5 hours to fully recharge, but the fans run even lower. And finally, if you need the fastest charge, you can switch it to the 1500 watt mode. In this setting, the Delta 3 goes from 0 to 100% in just 56 minutes, which is much faster than the Delta 2. I'd only use this when it's really necessary though, since charging at full speed all the time can put a bit more wear on the battery over the long run. The second way to recharge the Delta 3 is with solar panels. I don't personally own EcoFlow's panels, but the good thing is it's compatible with pretty much any brand, as long as the panels are under 60 volts and use an XT60 connector. For example, with a 400 watt all-power solar panel, it can charge the Delta 3 from 0 to 100% in around 3 hours. I also have a 200 watt Renogy solar panel, and with something like that, it can take around 6 to 7 hours depending on the sun conditions. So that makes it pretty flexible. And lastly, the third way to recharge this power station is through your car. I saved this one for last because there's usually a lot of confusion around it. If you use the included cable, the one that connects from the XT60 port to your car's cigarette lighter, most cars are limited to around 100 watts on that outlet. That's exactly what I was getting with mine, and at that rate it would take close to 10 hours or more to fully recharge the Delta 3. The way to fix this is with a car alternator charger. EcoFlow makes their own version that's designed to work directly with their units, but I don't own or use that one. Instead, I've been using one from the Alternator brand, which is a universal alternator charger that works with pretty much any portable power station. Basically, it bypasses the cigarette lighter limitation and can pull up to 500 watts directly from your car's alternator. You can even combine that with another 500 watts of solar for a total of 1000 watts of charging. But keep in mind, the Delta 3 itself is limited to 500 watts of solar input, so that's the max it will actually take. Still, that's about 5 times faster than charging through the cigarette port, which makes a huge difference when you're on the road. Now, in case you want to try this setup yourself, let me give you a quick walkthrough of how to do it. The kit actually comes with everything you need to get started. You get a thick, long cable that connects directly to your car battery, a fuse to protect the system, and even a pair of MC4 connectors in case you want to add solar panels into the setup later. For now, I'll keep it simple and just show you how to hook it up to your car. The only thing you'll need to get separately is an XT60 connector with ring lugs, since that doesn't come in the package. That's the piece you need to plug this setup directly into the Delta 3. So the first thing we're going to do is grab the cable. One end is longer and the other is shorter. The shorter end is where we're going to place the fuse. Just unscrew the bolt, slide the end of the cable in, and then tighten the bolt back down. Next, take the other end of the cable and connect it to the side of the charger where it says Alternator Input. It has 2 screws there. Just slide the wires in and tighten them down. Now, on the opposite side of the charger, you'll see the DC output. This is the cable that runs to the power station, and for the Delta 3, that's going to be the cable that runs to the XT60 connector. From here, supposing this is your car battery, we are going to start by connecting the red cable to the positive terminal, and the black cable to the negative terminal. And finally, once that's set, plug the XT60 connector into the solar input on the power station. And that's it, the setup is ready to go. Now, I just turned on the Alternator alternator charger, and right away it started pulling around 460 watts, which is exactly what we want to see. If you want to get the most out of it, you can also connect the charger to the Smart Life app. From there, you get access to a ton of features and settings. But to keep it simple, the only thing I really recommend adjusting is the charging start voltage. Right now, I have mine set at 12.5 volts just for this demo, to make sure it kicks on and shows you the charge. But in reality, you'll want to set this closer to 14 volts. The reason is simple. You want the charger to start working only when the alternator is running, not when the car is off. That way, it pulls power from the alternator, not directly from your battery, so you don't risk draining it while the engine isn't running. So that's my full review of the EcoFlow Delta 3. If you need something reliable for camping, road trips, outdoor events, or even as a backup at home, this thing is a great option. It's got plenty of power, it charges crazy fast, and the app gives you more control than most others out there. Overall, it's honestly one of the most complete power stations I've tested. I'll leave a link to this power station down in the description, along with all the other gear I used in this video in case you want to check them out. I really hope you enjoyed this review and that it helped answer most of your questions. If you still have any, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'll be more than happy to help. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.